This is Operation Sininder, where India strikes 9 sites in Pakistan in response to what it claims was Pakistan-sponsored massacre in Bahawalpur that killed 26 tourists to avenge this incident. India reportedly used a mix of advanced weaponry, including the French-made Scalp Missile, also known as Storm Shadow, and the Hammer, precision-guided freefall bomb. But here's the twist: Pakistan claims it shot down 5 Indian jets, with more details all in the video. Ahead, we'll now look at the detailed timeline of how the operation unfolded, beginning with the launch of India's fighter jets, including the French-made Rafale, at around 1:28 in the morning. India initiated precision missile strikes on 9 high-value targets located in Pakistan or Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. These targets reportedly included key locations such as Bahawalpur, the headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed Muridke, known to house Lashkar-e-Taiba facilities, as well as Tehra Kalan, Sialkot, Bhimber, Kotli, and Muzaffarabad. The Indian Air Force deployed Rafale jets armed with Scalp cruise missiles and Hammer precision-guided bombs. The entire aerial operation lasted approximately 23 minutes. Conducted with high coordination and speed between 1:28 and 1:51 a.m. Loud explosions were reported across several cities, with power outages occurring in Baha and Muzaffarabad. Adding to the chaos and confusion on the ground, the strike was believed to have originated primarily from Ambala Air Force Station in Haryana, one of Indian Air Force main Rafale bases, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. A formation of Rafale fighter jets equipped with Storm Shadow air-launched cruise missiles took off from possibly Ambala. Under radio silence, the Rafale, with its long range and stealth-friendly profile, ascended to high altitude and maintained an oblique flight path toward the international border, skirting radar coverage while staying within Indian airspace. At around 100 to 120 kilometers from the Indo-Pak border, the Scalp missiles were launched toward pre-programmed coordinates inside Pakistan's interior, reportedly targeting infrastructure. It's tied to cross-border terror logistics. Given the Scalp range of over 500 km, French Rafale did not need to enter Pakistani airspace, and the missile likely traveled at low altitudes, using terrain-hung guidance to evade enemy radar before striking with high accuracy. Simultaneously, a secondary wave of Rafale aircraft, armed with Hammer, highly agile modular munition, extended-range bombs, was deployed for tactical strikes on forward positions near the line of control. These jets, possibly taking off from Ambala as well, or forward operating strips in Jammu, launched the Hammer bombs from a standoff range of approximately 50 to 70 kilometers, targeting bunkers and movement corridors near areas like Kotli and Bhimber. These precision bombs are capable of penetrating hardened shelters and were likely used to neutralize fortified shelters believed to house Milan operatives or weapons caches. At roughly the same time, Sukhoi Su-30 fighter aircraft were launched from Vireli Air Force Station. They might be carrying air-launch variants of the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. The Sukhoi Su-30 followed a different trajectory, sweeping further south and west before launching BrahMos missiles aimed at key logistical nodes, including suspected weapons, dumps, and radar installations supporting asymmetric warfare. The BrahMos, flying at speeds over Mach 2.88, reduced enemy reaction time, drastically hitting targets that lay up to 400 to 500 kilometers inside Pakistani territory. With the Su-30 extended range, the aircraft could complete the mission and return without crossing hostile airspace. In support of these air missions, a network of loitering drones, possibly indigenous Alphas or Israeli Sky Striker units, was deployed from mobile forward launchers near Ridge and Punch. These unmanned systems were launched hours earlier and had been circling their assigned target areas. Once real-time signals confirmed enemy movement or leadership presence, these kamikaze drones dove on their targets, causing localized but critical damage, particularly to mobile radio stations and a command vehicle convoy reportedly en route to a hardened shelter. Unconfirmed reports emerging from the region suggest that Pakistan mounted a swift and forceful response following a recent escalation, allegedly resulting in the downing of 5 Indian aircraft, according to statements attributed to Pakistani military officials. The assets targeted included 3 Dal Rafale fighter jets, a Sukhoi Su-30A, Mikoyan M29, and an Israeli-made drone. But before we move ahead, let's take a look at how this French-made Scalp missile works. Storm Shadow missiles can be launched from the Dassault Rafale, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and most recently the MiG 29, or the Su-27 jets, as shown here in the animations. It is a low observable air-launch cruise missile. Interestingly, the development of the Storm Shadow missile is also known as Scalp EG in France. Comparing this to a person will help you understand its size even better. Let's compare this to the American cruise missile, or the Russian missile. For now, we will look at the B-steps format of how this works. Aircraft releases the missile after a few seconds. The missile opens its two wings. It first uses inertial and GPS for guidance at the first stage of the missile, drops to low cruising altitude and identifies its position using GPS, just like the animation shown here. As you can see, it flies below the radar and close to the hills and ground. This is why the Pakistan Army radar could not detect the Storm Shadow missile at the final stage. A thermal homing head and a terrain contour matching are used to guide the missiles. This is how it works. It uses the IR sensor imaging infrared seeker to track and process images, helping it glide to its target. It climbs to a higher altitude. This helps the command and control to even monitor the target in the dark using a two-way data link. For the final maneuver of the nose cone is jettisoned to allow a high-resolution thermographic camera or infrared homing to observe the target area. The missile then tries to locate its target. Based on its preloaded data information, if all is approved, it then dives to destroy the target. But let's take a look at how all this started. According to India, Adil Ahmed Thera, who had returned from Pakistan, played a key role in guiding the group. Thoker and his associates had crossed into India from Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir through the rugged and remote Pantrajuri sector of the line of control back in October 2024. This sector, known for its difficult terrain, has historically been exploited for illegal crossings. After infiltrating, the group moved covertly through the forested and mountainous routes of Jammu and Kashmir. They carefully avoided detection by sticking to interior tracks and hilly belts, eventually making their way to Anand-Nig and finally to Pahulam. The attackers emerged from the dense pine forest surrounding Bazoran Meadow, beloved tourist destination, and launched their assault, opening fire on the unsuspecting tourists gathered there. Let's look at the detailed timeline of the attack and how the horror unfolds. At around 2:25, survivors reported hearing the first bursts of gunfire. While tourists were picnicking or preparing to leave, a brief, eerie silence followed, sowing confusion and fear among the visitors. By 245 armed militants in camouflage clothing emerged from the nearby forest and began firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Witnesses described how the attackers sometimes singled out men, asking if they were Muslims before deciding whether to shoot. Many tourists scrambled for cover, hiding behind fences, sliding down muddy slopes, or diving into pits to avoid the gunfire. The shooting continued relentlessly for about 30 minutes. By 3 o'clock in the evening, the attackers were targeting tourists, attempting to escape near the few available exit points in the brutal attack. At least 26 people were killed, including a Navy officer on his honeymoon and a former banker. Around 3:40 p.m. Indian Army helicopters arrived overhead, signaling the beginning of a large-scale evacuation operation. Special forces swiftly secured the area. By 4 o'clock p.m., escorting the stunned and terrified survivors to safety, in the chaos that followed, the terrorists managed to vanish once again into the surrounding dense forest before security forces could engage them. Eyewitnesses and investigators later reported that the attackers used the forest cover to facilitate their escape, taking full advantage of the rugged topography and natural camouflage offered by the terrain to further evade. Tracking, the group reportedly discarded stolen mobile phones during their retreat. As of the latest updates, the terrorists remain at large, with a massive manhunt underway across the forests and hills around Pahulam and Anand-Nig. This is how Pakistan might respond if India attacks continue for the next couple of months. For now, both sides seem determined to avoid the unthinkable, the use of nuclear weapons, but neither seemed willing to back down from full-scale conventional war. Pakistan, knowing its military and economy were dwarfed by India's, understood that time was not on its side. Their generals agreed that if war must come, they had to be fast and brutal. Pakistan's strategy would be simple: strike hard, strike early, seize territory, and force the world to intervene before India could bring its overwhelming strength to bear. As you watch this data, brokers may be collecting and selling your personal information, your home address, phone number, online searches, and Even financial details. This data doesn't just result in spam calls and scam attempts. It can also affect your personal credit score as scammers. They manipulate your data, potentially leading to a loan denial. That's where Incon comes in to protect your privacy. The service scans the web for exposed data, sends automated removal requests, and continuously follows up to ensure your information stays deleted. It also performs regular scans to prevent data brokers from sneaking your information back into circulation, all while providing you with a clear real-time dashboard to track your data. So take your personal data back with Incon use. Code ATEL with the link below. Incon.com. eTele. And get 60% off on an annual plan they decided to turn. India's cold start doctrine, which envisioned lightning gas thrusts into enemy territory into a kind of desperate offensive of their own. This is how it will strike, just a reminder. Pakistan also have American Kusaya-16 fighter jets, but they cannot be used against India according to an agreement. So instead, they have these Chinese J-17 jets to make the first attack before dawn on the first day. Pakistani jet will roar across the border, aiming to India's frontline air bases in Punjab, Rajasthan, and Jammu. Their missiles scream down onto radar stations, command hubs, and airfields, seeking to blind Indian defenses and soften the ground for what would come next. Pakistan will then deploy the main battle tank, the Khalid, along with several support vehicles. They will move from the Lahore-Sialkot corridor. Pakistan's elite armored divisions, thundered, will into Indian Punjab. Their immediate objective is clear: seize Amritsar and the surrounding districts. Before India could react, holding Indian territory would give Pakistan powerful leverage in negotiations later, provided they could hold on to it at the same time. Across the rugged mountains of Kashmir, Pakistani special forces, irregular fighters, and seasoned infiltrators pushed across the line of control. Their mission was even more ambitious: as sever the vital Jamshednagar highway and isolate the Kashmir Valley from the rest of India. Farther south, Indian forces surged into Pakistan's Sindh province, racing towards Hyderabad and Karachi, hoping to draw Indian reserves away from the real action. Meanwhile, at sea, Pakistan's Navy knew it was badly outmatched against a massive Indian Navy submarine and carriers. Rather than risking a head-on battle, they sent their submarines into the dark waters of the Arabian Sea to lay deadly minefields near Mumbai and Gujarat's coastline. Their job was not to defeat India's navy, but to disrupt, delay, and force India to divert precious resources. Now, let's look at how India Cold Start military doctrine works. Involves the various branches of India's military conducting offensive operations as part of a unified battle groups. Even as Pakistani tanks crossed the frontier, the Indian Air Force, much larger and more powerful than Pakistan's, was already executing its own battle plan. They had the cutting-edge Rafale fighters alongside the tried and tested MiG-21s and the formidable Sukhoi Su-30. Within minutes, these aircraft would meet Pakistan's advancing armored columns head-on, diving into the battlefield. Like hawks, waves of fighter bombers shielded by electronic jammers and escorted by interceptors plunged deep into Pakistani airspace. Their targets were carefully chosen: air defense networks, radar stations, and key military hubs in cities like Lahore, Saro, and Malta. The mission was brutal in its clarity, paralyzed Pakistan's ability to command and control its forces, strip away its defenses, and leave its military exposed to the full fury of India's advancing war machine. As Indian jets shredded the skies above India's ground forces, the powerful strike corps began their thunderous advance toward the border. They brought with them the fearsome Russian-made T-90 tanks, India's own Arjun tanks, and an endless stream of armored vehicles that turned the earth beneath them into a trembling plain. Their tanks and mechanized infantry smashed through Pakistani defenses with cold, relentless precision. Within just 48 hours, Indian units were at the gates of Lahore. They bypassed strong points, choosing instead to encircle the city, cutting off from reinforcement and supply every mile gained on Pakistani soil brought with it an ever-growing risk of escalation. But India's generals knew time was their enemy. They pressed forward, determined to achieve a decisive victory before the international community could impose a ceasefire. Farther south, Indian forces surged into Pakistan's Sam province, racing towards Hyderabad and Karachi. Their objective was clear: to sever Pakistan's southern arteries, cutting off Karachi the beating heart of Pakistan's economy from the rest of the country. Meanwhile, in Kashmir, Indian forces fought with brutal determination to repel Pakistani infiltrators, yet they avoided a deep counteroffensive. Across the line of control, wary that any major territorial gains could provoke Pakistan into crossing its nuclear threshold at sea, India's navy moved with ruthless efficiency. Carrier battle groups steamed into position off the Pakistani coast, imposing a tight blockade around Karachi. Ramos missiles rained down on Pakistan's port facilities and vital energy infrastructure. Even Guad, Pakistan's prized port built with immense Chinese investment, found itself under attack as Indian warships ruled the Arabian Sea with almost complete impunity during the first furious week of war. Both nations suffered grievous losses. The front lines were fluid, the battles fierce, but it quickly became clear that India's greater weight, its larger military, its deeper reserves, its greater industrial power was beginning to tip the balance inside Pakistan's high command. As Lahore teetered on the edge of encirclement in Karachi, face strangulation whispers of the darkest possibilities began to surface. Tactical nuclear weapons. The last terrible card in Pakistan's hand loomed closer to reality. We make original 4K 3D animation with a small team of animators. So please support us by subscribing and dropping in a comment for more exclusive engineering animations made just for you.